Hello and welcome to the latest Blood Red podcast from the Liverpool Echo. I'm your host, Joe Rimmer, joined today by Theo Squires. How are we, Theo?
Rather better than the others that went to Plymouth, I should say.
Yeah.
It's quite nice not having that weekend in Plymouth.
Yeah, and we're also joined by a special guest, a Blood Red original, the Athletic's James Pearce. How are we, James?
I'm good, thanks, Joe. Yeah, thanks for having me back in.
Were you on the first ever Blood Red podcast?
Probably, yeah.
You and Andy would have been?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. We didn't have any of this swanky gear.
No.
It was Andy's old iPhone plonked in the middle of the table, and sometimes he'd pressed it twice by mistake, and it turned out I hadn't recorded, and we just did it all over again. But times have moved on a bit.
Yeah, they certainly have. But it's great to have you back, and such a good game to get sucked into, isn't it, as well?
Yeah.
Liverpool did us a favour yesterday for this podcast and lost 1-0 to Plymouth in the FA Cup. But we'll get into that shortly. A couple of things, a couple of bits of housekeeping first. First of all, a shout out to our sponsors, NordVPN. To get the best discounts off your NordVPN plan, go to nordvpn.com/bloodred, and our link gives you 4 months extra on a 2-year plan. There's no risk at all with Nord's 30-day money-back guarantee. The link is in the podcast episode description box. And I've actually had some really nice feedback on Nord. So the people at Nord, I should forward this on, but Sarah has emailed me to say, just a quick note to say thanks to you and the team for the Blood Red podcast. I look forward to new episodes and listening while I walk outdoors here in Los Angeles, which sounds quite nice, doesn't it? I was recently travelling to Mexico and needed a tool to help make sure I didn't miss my beloved Liverpool matches, and Nord came through for me. I didn't miss a second of the critical Brentford match. Super easy to use, no issues whatsoever, and highly recommend it. So thank you, Sarah, for that. That's great. I'm sure that the good people at Nord would be happy to hear it. And I've also got a couple of questions from Ben Gary and Michael Goldborn, which I'll get to in the course of the podcast. And if you do have any questions or thoughts, drop them in the chat on YouTube. I'm keeping an eye on it so we can put them to James and Theo. And do give us a like, subscribe, thumbs up, all the nice stuff. We very much appreciate it. So let's start. James, you can start. Plymouth 1, Liverpool 0. I've had an email this morning from someone saying, Onslaught disrespected the FA Cup. What are your thoughts on the outcome of that game and perhaps on his team selection?
Yeah, do you know what? I didn't have a problem at all before the game, and I don't think you can then change your mind afterwards about the team he picked. I thought it made perfect sense in the context of what Liverpool have got coming up. You know, Wednesday's trip to Goodison, the first of 5 Premier League games in the space of 15 days. You know, the winning the title has to come before anything else this season. And yeah, of course, you want to try and stay in everything as long as possible. And it still frustrated me sat there watching it because it was dour. And, especially there were senior players there who certainly let themselves down on the day in terms of what they produced. And, in some of those players, you think, well, when are you going to get your next game now with Liverpool going out of the FA Cup? It might have to wait a fair amount of time to get another chance. But I think selection-wise, the only thing that kind of, it struck me when the team sheet dropped, and then as the game wore on, you thought this is now an even bigger issue, was the lack of options on the bench. Because I think if you'd had, say Alexis McAllister, who I think only played 15, 20 minutes against Tottenham on Thursday night, if you'd had him out there, I think Liverpool probably win that game. It was, and again, it was kind of probably made harder by the fact you lose Joe Gomez early on. So then you lose the experience of Endo in midfield, but then you got suddenly it was such an inexperienced midfield 3 that there was no control, and it was frustrating, I'd say. But yeah, in the grand scheme of things, Liverpool have got much bigger fish to fry than the FA Cup. And yes, a quadruple talk would have been lovely, wouldn't it, if it had continued into the business end of the season, but there's a good reason why no one's ever won the lot, because it's incredibly difficult to do.
Well, that word that you've just used there, quadruple, that to me is my issue with the whole thing, Theo. I find that as soon as people start talking about that, I mean, we saw it a couple of years ago, it adds pressure, an unnecessary pressure, because like James said, no one's ever done it, and there's a reason for that. And it always feels a bit, especially at this time of the year, it's February, it feels a bit pie in the sky to start talking about quadruple, but you know how the media works, and it will happen. So to me, yesterday, as soon as the final whistle went, I delete it from my mind, and I'm sure Liverpool will be doing similar, because like James said, they've got bigger fish to fry, and it's so intense now, isn't it, the league and the Champions League? What were your thoughts on it yesterday, and do you think that it was almost a bit of a blessing in disguise?
Yeah, I think it's definitely a blessing in disguise. Like, when it comes to the domestic cups, really you choose one or the other. You don't expect to go all the way in both. And with the League Cup coming first, you're in a semi-final by the time the FA Cup's coming around. So you prioritise that. That is the one you want to go all out for. The FA Cup just gets in the way. Like Liverpool now have got a really nice March coming up in terms of weekends off. So they're not going to have to do this sort of rotation again because they can just give the whole squad that rest. They can be really in top condition going into April, going into May, focus on the Premier League, focus on the Champions League. The team he put out, it should have been strong enough to win. Like that front three, all internationals who've won the biggest honours going, they just didn't perform. Midfield, maybe it's lacking that one body, isn't it? Like you're looking at that squad and it's McConnell at right back, or you've got Endo at centre back when Gomez goes off. It was lacking that one player. But these things happen. Players do have off days. The reason he put that squad out was because they needed minutes, and it just ended up looking like this shadow squad that hadn't played much together. And as James said, they're not going to get many opportunities now going forward. But it pays off in the fact that you can now just focus on the Premier League, focus on the Champions League, and focus on that League Cup final. It's a hard one to stomach.
If you're not in the League Cup final, I think it is.
Yeah.
It's slightly different, isn't it? But with one trophy already to aim for there, it sort of eases the pressure, doesn't it, a little bit on the FA Cup?
We saw that a couple of years ago. Like if Liverpool didn't go all the way in the FA Cup final, then to the FA Cup final, they'd probably do better in the Champions League because created chances, but they weren't at the best. We saw Van Dijk come off injured in the final. We saw Salah come off injured in the final. Fabinho came off injured against Aston Villa. It got to that business end and they lost key bodies. Whereas here, you take those fixtures out now. You can just focus. You can manage it more carefully. And there is that pressure too. Like I think I said after the Forest game, it's almost good to get that early defeat out the way because now you've got that first defeat, but no one's going to be talking about, could they be invincible? You've now got 3 months where no one's going, can they win the lot? It is just back to what the squad want to do, take it a game at a time.
Yeah, I had a big debate with our Everton reporter, Joe Thomas, before, and he was very much saying it was a missed opportunity for Liverpool. They've been so good this season, they could go for a quadruple. But his point was, you're so far ahead in the league. This was an opportunity. And I said, well, there's 6 points. I know they've got the game in hand, but it's a pretty big game on Wednesday night. But do you think that, I suppose that the wider perception of Liverpool is they're going really, really well in the league, but we know, don't we, how small those margins are? And if you lose key players, a 6 point gap isn't really the biggest, is it?
No, especially when you look at the 5 games Liverpool have got. I mean, Liverpool's recent record at Goodison isn't great in terms of winning games. Like they haven't, obviously last season was the first time they'd lost there for a long time. But what have they probably won?
0-0s and
probably
So
won.
Klopp won twice.
Yeah, I think he might have won 3 of the last 10. I think at Goodison. So it's that is a really, really tough game on Wednesday night. You've then got Wolves at home. Okay, you're expected to win that with a bit to spare. But then Villa away. I sat and watched Villa play top. They've got their mojo back. Villa that is up there with one of the most hardest away games going in the league.
Very good
season.
January transfer window too.
Yeah. Just you can see the lift that it's given that team. And then of course Man City away, and again as bad as Man City have been for big chunks of this season, the Etihad will be up for that because they would love to throw a spanner in the works. And then Newcastle coming to Anfield midweek after that, and we saw at St James's Park back in December, the problems they cause slot side. So the league is a million miles away from being won, and that is why he was absolutely right, in my opinion, to do what he did selection-wise yesterday. It was just, could he have just had 1 or 2 extra options on the bench just to make that little bit of difference? But then even, I still think then for Liverpool to go a long way in the FA Cup, they'd have needed luck in the draw for the 5th round, because I think, say they'd have got Newcastle away, Liverpool would have lost because he would have put out a team, probably 7 or 8 changes. So, I just don't think, with the way that the schedule is now, I mean, if Liverpool had gone the distance in all competitions, 65 games, with, obviously the extra 2 you have in the Champions League now. So, something had to give at some point. And, the reality is, if Liverpool win at Goodison on Wednesday night, nobody's going to be harping on about Plymouth.
That's it. And again, I think if he had played Salah, or let's say play Salah or Van Dijk, and they pick up an injury and you beat Plymouth, I don't think anyone would have been sitting there saying great result. I think everyone would have been concentrated on the injury, and
we saw that a few years ago, didn't we? Was it Jota against Midtjylland in the Champions League?
Of course,
It's happened before. You got to focus on the bigger priorities here.
Yeah.
And the only thing it has done with the derby is before you win at Bournemouth, you think you could probably take a draw in the derby now. Going through Bournemouth and Everton away, getting 4 points is good. But now, because you've got that defeat in there, they kind of need that. The pressure's there to get another win. But then that's good for Liverpool in the long run anyway, because that would be another couple of points on the board.
Yeah, just a quick one on the FA Cup before. I don't want to talk about a couple of player performances, but I don't want to dwell too much. But do you, either of you think, again, it was a debate we were having with Joe and the others this morning, do either of you think that there could be something done to the FA Cup just to give it a bit more importance? Because I think the way the schedule is now, and especially this year with the Champions League now adding those extra games, both to the group stage and to the for the teams that have to play in that extra round, it just feels like, especially for the top clubs, an inconvenience. I mean, the League Cup, like you say, if you're in the League Cup semis, then you can already picture winning that trophy, so that you have to prioritise that. Champions League, obviously the league, and Champions League places if you compete for that. I feel like the FA Cup is in danger of falling down people's priorities even more. Do you think that's fair to say?
Yeah, I think so. I genuinely don't know what can be done about it, to be honest, because I think it's happened over an extended period, hasn't it? Where now you see it is an inconvenience for a lot of the top clubs, and they do put out such weakened lineups that then, even when we see an upset, it doesn't feel like the upsets of old when, you would have seen the big stars go into, a League One, a League Two ground, and, if you get turned over, it was like, wow, that's amazing. In actual fact, in the cold light of day, is it that much of a shock that Liverpool team lost to Plymouth? Yeah, Plymouth, credit to them on the day. But, that was such a makeshift Liverpool 11. And I think the FA haven't helped themselves with the way that they string it out over so many days, and just, the importance of the Premier League and the Champions League, and just from a financial perspective as well, the prize money FA Cup wise, there's all this talk, right? Maybe if the winners got Champions League qualification, would that change the way some managers view it? Maybe, yeah, but yeah, I just don't think the FA Cup is ever going to become again what it was for so long. Because growing up as a kid, I remember feeling that winning the FA Cup was probably, at times it felt bigger than winning the league, because it was just the cup final day. It was such a special one. But those days are long gone.
Yeah. I think they've tried to make it have this little revamp this year in terms of Premier League games aren't on when you get to the later stages. The FA Cup has its own weekends. They've got rid of the replays. But if you're a top side, you're looking at it going, oh, great, we get 2 weekends off in March. We don't have to go to the fifth round or the quarter final. We can focus on the league instead. And if you give it a Champions League place, well, realistically, if you're a side that needs to rely on the FA Cup to get a Champions League place, then you're a top club, something's gone wrong in the Premier League. You're a Manchester United, you're a Tottenham Hotspur. You're not these elite Liverpool Arsenals. You're putting out your fringe players anyway, so it doesn't change it that way. It's just the way it's gone. And unless there's more prize money on it, what motive is there for the big teams to really go for it? When you've got the Champions League, there's now the FIFA Club World Cup, which is going to have even more finances riding on that. And that's detrimental to the calendar in terms of playing 12 months around. But if you get a choice of playing throughout your summer in that or playing the FA Cup, the big clubs are going to go for the money. That's what it is in football these days. The money talks.
Yeah, I think, and I would say this because I'm always talking about the League Cup, but I think the League Cup's stolen the march on it because it's played earlier. I think the pressure's off a bit more teams. I mean, they still rotate their team really heavily, but I feel like playing those semi-finals and the final earlier in the season just makes it stand out a bit, whereas I think the FA Cup's been lost in the shuffle of very important competitions. And, like you said, the FA Cup in the past meant a great deal because if you don't win the league, then that's the next thing. But now people want to be in the top 4, maybe even the top 5 this year.
But you see, even clubs, you see even mid-table Premier League clubs making 7, 8, 9 changes, and it's and you think, well, if they're not even thinking this is we've got to really go out flat out for this. It's just because then it even comes down to the prize money for where you finish in the Premier League, and so you've got the top end of the Premier League, whether you're going for the title or going for top 4 or Europa League, that becomes more important. And if you're in the bottom 6 or 7, staying in the Premier League is worth so much money that, I don't really think there's much saving the FA Cup really in terms of getting it back to where it was previously.
Let's talk about a couple of the player performances. Theo Chiesa, we'll start with him. Really struggled yesterday, but we have seen glimpses, I think, in the Eindhoven game and a couple of other games recently when he's come off the bench. that his attitude is looked great. He's tried to seize the moment a little bit. Is it a bit of a worry for him, as James said before? Liverpool going out that competition, he's not going to have as many chances now, and just felt like he was starting to build up a little bit of a head of steam at Liverpool, and feels like it's been snuffed out a bit.
That's the biggest concern for him, that he isn't going to get the opportunities now. Like we've seen when he is in the Premier League matchday squad, he's the last one brought on. 9 times out of 10, he's the one left out when they've got everyone fit. Obviously, they've got a couple of injuries now, so he'll probably be on the bench against Everton, but he isn't getting the game time. He is just a squad player. And it was an opportunity for him to show what he could do against Plymouth, as he had done against PSV. He worked hard. He was a willing runner throughout. Like there was one moment early on when he was back in his own corner flag sort of way, trying to get position back. But everything went wrong for him. Like the passing, the touches, when he was crossing right at the end, like going out too deep. But he wasn't the only one. It just was a mismatch of a side, and it wasn't clicking. It does happen. But yeah, it felt like a step backward, and you can't really justify when he's going to come into that side next. Like none of the players who started that game, apart from maybe Luis Diaz, can expect to start the derby now. When do you want to turn to him? Probably when you're in a Champions League semi-final, you've already won the league, and you want to rotate at the weekend. That's the only chance, really. You're going to look at these players now. Like we've seen Elliott barely get a sniff in the Premier League this year. There's been nothing there to suggest that's going to change anytime soon.
Well, Elliott's the other one who... Harsh on Elliott, because obviously he's had a good Liverpool career so far, but it feels like that he's had to take a long time to convince Arne Slot, and it was a difficult performance. Obviously, he gave away the pen; it's unlucky, but in general, it felt like a step back for him.
Yeah, it was, and I think watching his interview afterwards, I think you could see he was hurting because no one wants to do better for Liverpool than Harvey Elliott, and his chances have been limited, and he doesn't want to be this kind of super sub that's just can just provide that injection of energy and dynamism for 10, 15 minutes, a bit like he did off the bench at Brentford a few weeks ago. He wants to be more than that. And yeah, he won't need telling that was a mile off. It kind of smacked to me of a kind of performance where it was almost like things started badly for him and he was almost trying so hard to try and turn it round. It was like his mind was a bit frazzled. I thought there was a few passes he played where it was like, well, who was that for? Like, it was almost like that, in trying to make up for what he'd done wrong, he kind of forgot, lost complete track of just the common sense pass and the common sense option. I just don't think it was a day really when any of those senior options in the squad did themselves justice. I mean, just picking up what Theo said, Chiesa, that was the biggest frustration for me because I thought PSV was a big step forward for him. The work ethic, the quality he showed, and you thought, well, on a day like that at Plymouth with so many young players, it's like they're looking to someone like Chiesa to be, you might one of the leaders on the day and to really set the tone. And just made so many mistakes. I lost count of how many, dozens of times he seemed to lose possession cheaply. And Tsimikas was another one. Usually you can bank on his quality from wide areas, even though defensively he can be suspect at times. But that was awful. It was just
the delivery was atrocious. The set pieces.
Yeah, there were just, there were very few players that came out of that game with any credit whatsoever.
It's really difficult though, isn't it? Though games like that, because I feel like this isn't a knock on Plymouth, but they drag you into it. They drag you into the slog, the fight, and like you say, it's this scratch Liverpool team which. They didn't see any sort of patterns of play where they strung a few passes together. They suffered the injury early, which disrupts things further. And I think it's harsh on the likes of Diaz and Jota. They'll just bounce back. Even Tsimikas, to an extent, because he's been rotated at left back this season a fair bit. So I think they'll bounce back. But the likes of Elliott and Chiesa, I feel a bit sorry for because every minute is crucial for them, and I feel like. They were dragged into it a little bit yesterday, and they don't want that to be the lasting impression.
Well, yeah, it's like you're judging them for playing playing alongside players that aren't used to playing these games together against the side that is going to make it horrible. Arne Slot said it himself, like compared to the United game, didn't he? It was a similar sort of style from Plymouth in terms of pumping it long, doing it on the counter attack, making it as difficult as they can with a low block, and it is hard to find your best there. It's hard when you're in the top of your game like Salah, Van Dijk, etc. Never mind when you haven't had the minutes and you're alongside players that you've not really played much with before. It's difficult, and it's just these are why they're only getting 15, 20 minutes. And it's probably harder for someone like Elliott in terms of if Jurgen Klopp was still in charge, he knows he's got that manager's full faith, full backing. Whereas with Arne Slot, he's playing catch up. He missed so much through injury. He's got this feeling maybe that the manager doesn't quite fancy him. The fact that they'd rather put Curtis Jones at number 10 if Szoboszlai is not there than turn to him in his natural position. When he has had starts, not many of them have come in that favoured position. So it's just all those seeds of doubts coming in. It's very difficult for any of them to find rhythm. When are they going to get it now? It's just making that impact off the bench, as we saw against Brentford. That's what they've got to cling to now. They've done it in those sorts of games. Like Liverpool win the Premier League or the Champions League, they can still have a big say. They've just got to accept the fact that it's probably not going to come from the start, because there is a clear 11, 12, 13 players now that are the first choice. They are the go-to.
Look, I mean, if Liverpool win the big prizes, Elliott, Kaiser, Endo, I'm sure all these players will have a big impact, because you look at the players that contributed in the years that they did win them, and that the likes of Origi, he was a hero for a reason, wasn't he? Because he took advantage of the small opportunities he got, didn't he?
Yeah, and that's why there's always this knee-jerk reaction to a day like Sunday, where it's like, well, that's the end of they're almost like the end of their season or something. I think for some of them, they're certainly going to struggle to get chances to start games, but they still have a part to play, and we've seen it so often with Endo this season, where coming on for 10, 15 minutes to shore things up. He's been a great option. In terms of it hasn't let Liverpool down. I thought he was probably one of the few on the day. But you thought, I'm not sure Endo could have done much more to influence that game on Sunday. And the same for Harvey, and probably Chiesa's probably the one you'd be most worried about, because with the other options in attack, the fact he hasn't been getting on the bench, has he? When Slot's only been able to name 20 in the Premier League, so that he's probably, I'd say, the biggest loser from the day in terms of the knock-on effects of that defeat.
Yeah, I've seen a bit of chatter about Diaz, which I thought slightly harsh. I think he's had a pretty good season all told, but do you think Diaz is lost in this sort of positional mix at the moment? He feels like Slot hasn't decided whether he likes playing him down the middle or on the wing, and he's just not quite making his mark either way.
It's been difficult for him because he isn't a centre forward. He can do it, as we saw against Leverkusen, but it's not his natural position. And we're seeing how good Cody Gakpo is on the left. You can't not play Gakpo there at the moment, which is why he wasn't even on the bench against Plymouth. That's how well he's doing. With Diaz, it's like, you're coming in 1 week, you're up front, the next you're on the bench, then you're on the left wing, and it's not happening because you've not got the rhythm. He just seems to have fallen down the pecking order a little bit. His Liverpool seasons followed that traditional rhythm of starts it really well, scores loads of goals, doesn't quite keep it up, and then you start asking questions around January time when the transfer window's open, and now you're starting to doubt his future in the summer again. But this time, it isn't there's not a vacancy there for him in the squad, because Cody Gakpo's playing so well. And he's only really been starting games up front because Nunes hasn't been scoring goals for fun, and because Jota's been injured so much. If Jota's injury-free, Jota's starting up front. He will be the first choice centre-forward. So I can see why the criticism was on him, because he didn't get he's the one who's played most weeks. He's the one who's had the rhythm, and while it's teammates he's not used to playing alongside with, he can't say, I've been in and out of the side, it's not quite going for me, because he still plays a lot of football. It just didn't happen for him. Maybe he didn't really want to be there. Let's be honest, who did want to be at Plymouth yesterday? But he's still the one player out of that team who's got the best chance of starting against Everton. But you need a big reaction from him, because realistically, if he starts as up front, and we can see how inconsistent he is when he is up front.
Yeah, I don't quite love the Diaz in through the centre experiment. How have you felt about it?
No, a mixed bag. I think I think it's probably been influenced a little bit by just how good Gakpo has been on the left, because it felt like in the early months of the season that was like a real battle in terms of kind of inspiring each other to greater heights. But it was like actually Gakpo just kept going up and up. That Diaz didn't. So it was like, well, actually, if you're going to find room for Diaz, you play him through the middle. And of course, that kind of started off, didn't it, around a time when Jota was injured. Nunes clearly has taken a long time to try and adapt to what Slot wants from a number 9. Although I thought, in recent weeks there have been positive signs that he is a bit more in tune with what's being demanded from him. But yeah, I don't particularly like it, to be honest. Diaz through the middle. I think obviously Leverkusen, yes, it worked. I thought it worked at times. I think Tottenham away in the 6-3 when he. Yeah. But even then, it was almost like it almost like bamboozled Tottenham because he didn't really play anywhere near as a number 9, did he? Was drifting out wide a lot.
Szoboszlai was more the number 9.
And then Szoboszlai, obviously, because of Tottenham's high line, you had Szoboszlai bombing in behind, and that worked a treat. But in terms of against teams where, you know, you need someone as a focal point in attack and someone to occupy defenders, that's not Diaz's game. That's what it'd be interesting to see what he does do at Goodison on Wednesday. I certainly wouldn't be playing Diaz as the number 9 against Everton.
You thinking it? I don't know. You've done Aldo's column today, and Aldo thinks Nunes, but I mean, I know Nunes came on and didn't exactly pull up any trees, but he, I mean, it's got to be really, hasn't it? Jota didn't do that well. Diaz,
I just think you want Nunes' physicality. Yeah. Even as basic as things like defending set pieces at the other end as well, because Nunes does give you that extra kind of aerial presence.
Nunes seems to love an away game as well, doesn't he? Like, when the crowd's volatile, that's where we've seen his best Liverpool performances.
But that worries me as well, because you can sometimes see his best, but you can also see his worst, can't you?
We saw that at Goodison last year.
Headbutt Jared Branthwaite, but someone said Joe Gomez would have looked good as a 9 versus Spurs, and I think we could have put you in there, couldn't we?
Wouldn't go that far.
You've been on the pens though, wouldn't you? At least? Let's. I want to answer. I've got a couple of questions that I want you to answer, and then we'll talk Everton and the Premier League a little bit more. Let's start with a question from Ben Gary about Liverpool's away form this season. If you do want to send me a question, by the way, really happy to take them by email, joe.rimmer@reachplc.com. Send them. I usually record Mondays, Fridays, so I can always keep them on ice until then, so please just send them through. But Ben Gary sent one through. I think he sent this before the Plymouth game. So why are Liverpool so good away from home this season? They haven't lost there in the league. Touch wood, that continues on Wednesday. Are Slot or the players doing anything different to previous seasons to put this run together? Have you noticed anything, James? You've been home and away with them all season.
No, I mean, to be honest, they've been consistently good, you know, wherever they've played, to be honest, whether it's, you know, at Anfield or away from home. I think maybe what does help them a little bit away from home is that there is that tendency for teams to have to come out and play a little bit more and show a bit more ambition that then creates space, you know, to pick them off on the counter. But it has been a real feature of the Slot reign so far, isn't it, in terms of like winning games in different ways as well. There's been times when they've gone to places and, you know, really put on a show, other times where they've had to really scrap and fight and grind it out. And that's why I thought that the win at Bournemouth recently felt huge, because, you know, Bournemouth, such a combative team that asks so many questions of you, and to win that day in the way they did felt like a big step towards where everyone wants to see Liverpool, you know, lifting that trophy this season. So I wouldn't say there's anything kind of specific. I think there's just been lots of examples, especially in away games, where Slot has come up with the right combinations, the right substitutions, little tactical tweaks at half time. I think, you know, it's been a feature of his reign so far, isn't it? Being bold. You think right back to, you know, the first game of his reign at Ipswich on the opening weekend, when, you know, he decides to make the change with bringing on Konate at half time because he felt that they were losing too many physical duels, and that, you know, he has had a really, really good record of whether it's just little subtle tactical tweaks or personnel changes that has enabled Liverpool to go on this great run. And of course, even a couple of the defeats they have had in other competitions away from home, you know, you think about the one at Tottenham. Obviously, it doesn't really mean anything because they hammered them in the second leg. You think of the one at PSV, obviously, that, you know, a dead rubber in the Champions League, playing such a changed lineup, and very similar at Plymouth. So it's it's been really impressive just how Liverpool have repeatedly risen to challenges on their travels in tough places this season, and they're going to have to do that again on Wednesday night.
For me, I think it's that what's going right for them this year was what kind of went wrong last year. Like, they were the best team at home last season. The away form let them down at times. We saw at the end of the season where it wasn't quite going in these sorts of games, where Salah was out of form or they were leaky defensively. But this year you've had Konate and Van Dijk as this amazing partnership for the majority. Granted, Konate had a few weeks off with the injury, but they've looked so good. They've taken up next level. And in front of them you've got Gravenberch, whereas Liverpool were a bit swapping and changing, weren't they, last year at number 6. Salah's back to his best. He can get moments of magic out there like we saw against Bournemouth. But also the slight change of style in terms of they do control it more. They put their foot on it more. They pass it around. They slow it down. It's not this 100 miles an hour chaos that then creates the counter attacks, that the opportunities for the opposition. And if a side at home has a chance, they go close, you're going to get the crowd up, and that's going to get the players up. We see it at Anfield all the time for what spurs them on. It obviously works the other way around. But if Liverpool have got their foot on the ball and they're creating possession, keeping possession, there's less chances for the opposition. So there's less for the fans to go off. There's less for their players to feed off as well. So it probably all comes in a little bit. But Liverpool are just in a better condition than they were last year because they haven't had so many injuries. It's why they've been able to take that next step under Slot.
Yeah. I think it reminds me of Benitez a little bit, Slot, in the way that, like you said, he seems to react quite well to how other teams set up. He seems to notice things fairly early on in games and make tweaks. And they've been lucky with injuries, but I agree. I think the way they control the ball more and they slow things down. I mean, last season I felt like sometimes they would put themselves in trouble in bad areas, whereas when Liverpool give the ball away now, it tends to be in the opposition's final third and not in their own. So I think that has been an impressive part of their away form, is that they don't, I even think back to Brentford, and Brentford did have some decent chances, and so did Bournemouth actually, but I felt like Liverpool weren't giving away daft free kicks quite often. They, if they conceded a chance, it would tend to be on the counter where Brentford would come from the other end and they would be caught out a little bit, but they weren't gifting chances, which I think sometimes last season when they were kind of going hell to leather a little bit under Klopp, they coughed up the possession in poor areas. So it's been a really impressive part about his reign, hasn't it? Another question then from Michael Goldborn. He's in Vermont, which he says is very, very cold. He said, do you know what's going on with the documentary they filmed about Liverpool last season? It's coming out pretty soon, isn't it?
Couple of weeks, I think, isn't it? Yeah, on Amazon. So, obviously it's not quite what they hoped it would be initially. I think when the deal was done, and then obviously Klopp's announcement that he was
exclusive.
Yes, yeah. Klopp's announcement that he was stepping down at the end of the season. There was that, I think then the buzz was, well, this is going to be some the fairy tale end to the Klopp era, and obviously because of the way that it fizzled out, everything went so quiet about the documentary for quite a while, because I think unsurprisingly there wasn't the kind of demand and take up for it that would have been previously expected. So it wasn't a great shock to learn that it had kind of morphed into more of a look back on the Klopp era as a whole, rather than just the finale of those final few months. So yeah, looking forward to seeing it when it comes out.
Yep, certainly.
It's got to be better than being Liverpool.
Very Harley Davidsons. Yeah. Right, we'll move on to a little bit of the title race and obviously the big game on Wednesday night. Looking forward to seeing your old pal David Moyes.
It's going to be emotional.
Yeah, you and him have got a nice history, haven't you? How do you both see this game? I mean, we've had a discussion in the office there, and I kind of think I wonder with Everton winning the games that they have done recently, whether they'll come out a little bit more to play and not make it into as much of a dogfight as Sean Dyche did last year. I'd say. Yeah,
I hope so. I mean, from a Liverpool perspective, I think they'll be delighted if Everton do come out and try and take the game by the scruff of the neck. I think that would suit Liverpool. It's interesting, isn't it? Because I think when the game got called off initially, there was this feeling then of that's a blessing in disguise for Liverpool because of the injuries they had at that point. But it's I don't know. But then obviously you look at it now and it's like, well, actually going there at 12:30 on a Saturday compared to Goodison under the lights. What we know now with both clubs out the FA Cup, it will be the last ever derby at Goodison. And the fact that Everton have picked up, David Moyes, give him his credit, has kind of got some belief back into that squad and dragged them away from the relegation zone. Everton will be fine. They're not going down this season. So, that probably maybe does give them a bit more freedom rather than the kind of anxiety of, they're fighting for their lives. So it's going to be intriguing. I still think surely if you're Everton, you try and make it a scrap. And I think, even though the manager's changed, I think David Moyes will know that when Everton beat Liverpool back in, April, there was a degree of bullying them that day. And I still think that's probably Everton's biggest weapon is getting in their faces, using the noise around them, the atmosphere, because it will be it will be a cauldron, and trying to feed off that to unsettle and bully Liverpool, and that's why Liverpool have to be ready to stand up to that.
Your thoughts on it?
Everton might have too many injuries for it. That's one concern they'll have, because Mikalenko's a doubt now, isn't he? So that might mean Ashley Young at left back. They've lost a couple of bodies in midfield. It's going to have to be Beto up front. Granted, he scored a couple in the league the other week, but they are down to the bare bones. They had to put a pretty strong team out against Bournemouth, still lost. So you'd like to think that Liverpool haven't had the weekend off for 10, 11 players. They'll be fresh there. They can really go and set the record straight, bounce back from that FA Cup loss. But we know how intimidating Goodison can be under the lights. Aldo said it's probably their last game to celebrate this season, barring the last game at Goodison, because they're going to stay up. They're not going to have this FA Cup run now. It's like, what are you really looking forward to in that run-in when you know you're going to be 15th, 16th anyway? So it's how much they're all up for it. If the players have got that hunger in there to go and get that last derby win, or is there too much pressure because it is the last Goodison derby? That can help them come unstuck as well. It can go either way. Liverpool just have to be a hell of a lot better than they were at Goodison last year, and a lot better than they were against Plymouth at the weekend.
A few people on the desk were saying before everyone would shake on a point, but I feel like this game's... I think it's massive. I think it's so big in the sense that if Liverpool lose or even draw, I think if you're Arsenal, you look at that and go, right, it's on. We've got a big chance here because, as you said, with all those away games, 6, 7 points can quickly be whittled down, with a couple of draws or one defeat. And then, of course, Liverpool have got Arsenal to come to Anfield later in the season. But if Liverpool win, you look at it and think 9 points is massive. They've gone into their derby and got a win somewhere where they got beat last season. So someone here has just said we've got to win this derby. I kind of think Liverpool have got to win on Wednesday. I could be wrong. That's the emotion that I have going into it.
I mean, it would be huge, wouldn't it? Because I think if you're Arsenal, you're looking at Wednesday night and thinking, if it is going to happen for them in terms of the tide turning in the title race, you would have Wednesday night circled in the diary, wouldn't you? And I think especially because you would think it could set the tone for the next 15 days, because it is such an intense period. I don't know. I don't think. I think it depends on the circumstances of the game, wasn't it? I just think Liverpool haven't won at Goodison that many times in the last 10, 15 years that I'm not sure it was suddenly in the realms of, they have to win and anything else would be a disaster, because, what would they go, 7 points clear having played the same number of games as Arsenal. That's still a decent cushion. But I think it's more what winning the game would do for you, because I just think that is, what that does to Arsenal in terms of deflating them. If Liverpool were to go there and win and play like, potential champions.
At this stage of the season, I think it becomes a big psychological battle, doesn't it? And like James said, I think Arsenal will circle Wednesday night in the diary, but they'll also look at the whole of February and go, that's where we can make ground on Liverpool. Liverpool do play a lot of games, but a lot of tricky ones. 3 away days there that you would any team would look at and worry about. If Liverpool can get through to March with any sort of lead intact, and that's why I think if they can go 9 points clear psychologically for Arsenal, they'd think, wow, that's a big gap, and takes the pressure off for Villa away and City away.
Well, there's always narratives around these games. Like, if you're looking at it at a Liverpool point of view, Arsenal never drop points in their derby, whereas they can look at it the other way around and going, oh, Everton's a tricky one. Arsenal were never going to drop points to an Everton, whereas Liverpool, that is a tricky one. But then Liverpool can turn it and go, they always beat Spurs. They usually do quite well against Aston Villa, whereas they've been a tricky one for Arsenal. So have Newcastle. So it's just getting momentum now, building it up. On Saturday, I'd have been happy with a draw coming into this one, for this one. But now...
Sorry, what do you mean on Saturday?
On Saturday before Plymouth. So like...
But you said something about...
No.
Oh, sorry, I'm with you.
Before the Plymouth defeat, I'd have been happy with a draw in the derby.
Yeah.
But now I just think you need to get back to winning ways. You need that momentum there. You need to make sure Plymouth is a thing of the past. It's not being used against you as the wheels are coming off. You get that first win, you should beat Wolves. There's no reason why you shouldn't beat Wolves at Anfield. And then you've got, we can go to Villa now. We can go to Man City now. But it's just, if you drop points to Everton, that makes you doubt those 2 away games even more. So, you've just got to build momentum here. You've got to get those points on the board.
Yeah. I think it'll be massive, won't it, for the midfield? I think this could be, Gravenberch obviously has had an incredible season, as has McAllister, Szoboszlai. But I think they will be the foundation that any Liverpool success will be built on.
Yeah, they've just been so integral, haven't they? The three of those to everything Liverpool have achieved so far this season. And yeah, I think Gravenberch has been, he's just such a delight to watch, isn't he? He has this amazing ability to just, he always seems to be a couple of steps ahead. He's got such great awareness of everything going on around him, and I don't think he's not the kind of player that's going to be phased by the atmosphere and everything else around it. You would look to someone like Gravenberch on a night like that to kind of help set the tone and to give you that control. And you look at the shifts that Szoboszlai put in, especially against Tottenham last week. I thought he was outstanding. And McAllister, those three. It's arguably that's probably one of Klopp's greatest parts of his legacy in terms of the way in which that midfield was rebuilt before he left. To leave those three behind for the slot, and especially when you think of some of the crazy transfer fees that are thrown around now. I think the three of them, £130 million combined, so many years ahead of them as well. So yeah, and yeah, there are no excuses. Fresh all had a couple of days off, back in this week, and you wanna see Liverpool basically stamping their authority on that game from the start, and they're also gonna have to deal with that physical side, because I'm sure that will be a key part of Everton's approach to try and. I'm sure David Moyes will be saying to them, you've got to knock them out of their stride. You can't allow, Gravenberch to turn his way into space and start picking passes, as we know he's so capable of.
With this midfield three, it's kind of got the feel of we grew up on tales of the late 80s team. The trio of Aldridge, Barnes, Beardsley, when they came in and they made this great Liverpool team under Dalglish, you saw it firsthand. Liverpool go and win the league this year. Is this the modern day equivalent? That midfield trio have just gone and transforming a team, taking them to that next level.
I mean, we could talk about all three of them. I just want to say something about Szoboszlai, because I thought, like you said, Szoboszlai was superb against Spurs. I think he's quietly been. It's hard to put into a top three of Liverpool players this season, but I wouldn't say he's far off. Still don't feel like he gets fully the credit he deserves. I saw Carragher talking about him on the overlap the other day, saying that he's not his favourite player and it doesn't score enough goals. And I take the point. But I think number 10s are very different to what they were in the past. And the tone he sets, the work rate. I mean, I've never seen anyone he comes off the pitch looking like he's covered every blade of grass.
Yeah.
Bit of a cliche, but it's true. He puts in so much running. He's tall, he's physical, he wins headers. He seems to be involved in everything good Liverpool do going forward.
Yeah. It's such a pivotal role in the way that the whole of that team operates.
Yeah.
I think if you ask Slot, he would definitely say, well, not say it publicly, but I think he would probably say that he's probably one of the top, 2 or 3, certainly top 4 in terms of that role, with the athleticism, just the intensity of the work rate, his quality on the ball, but what he gives you off the ball. And I think sometimes he can be a little bit untidy, and there's times when you just think there's a lack of composure. Sometimes when that was why it was nice to see him tuck away that goal in the way he did against Tottenham, because he does get into so many good positions. He probably, I think he got 5 now for the season, but he probably should have a few more. But sometimes I do feel as if he puts in so much of a shift that sometimes by the time he gets into these positions, it's probably not a great surprise that there's you want him to be a bit calmer or whatever, because he's almost shattered by the time he's got there. But yeah, I think he's had quite a strange Liverpool career, because obviously he started ridiculously well first few months of last season, and there was all the stuff about, oh my god, it's the new Steven Gerrard and all the rest of it, and then there was it was almost like it was not sustainable, and then he drops off, and he had a few injury issues, and of course he wasn't even in the team, was he, back end of last season. But yeah, I think you only have to look at the way in which Slot has just gone, no, you are such a pivotal part of how this machine operates. And yeah, he's and again, the Wednesday night he's going to be huge in terms of if Liverpool win the game, that you'll be talking about the shift that Szoboszlai puts in.
He slots Firmino in terms of you build the team around him. That's how important he is to it. He does all the dirty work, all that running up front, And he might not get the goals or the assists, but he doesn't need to because of that hard work he puts in. You get more from Salah, you get more from Gakpo.
That's it. I don't think Liverpool need a goal scoring midfielder. They haven't really in the days of Klopp, did they? But they don't really now because he connects the midfield and the front three. Or slightly different setup, isn't it? But he connects the forward players. But it's a very different way. And I think when he came in, he made us. I sort of expected this classy midfielder who would score goals from distance and get on the end of things. And I think actually he's a bit more of a Cout type player, isn't he? He gets around, he gets involved, and he's always a big part of big wins. And yeah, I don't necessarily think we'll see him score lots and lots of goals each season, but I think every single time Liverpool play well, he tends to have been a big part.
He'll get double figures this year, though. I imagine that now. He's started to get a few more, hasn't he, last few weeks? Like he scored Tottenham, Ipswich. He's getting there.
It definitely worked out for the best not signing Mason Mount.
Yes, yeah, certainly. Well, very different types of player, though, aren't they? And I thought he was going to be more of a Mount style player, a bit more technical, and he's not really. He's like a powerhouse. So I think he'd be key at Goodison.
It's just curious as well that he was built as this player who's got amazing long range finishing, great at set pieces. You don't see him take shots from different distance because it's all about picking that next pass. Yeah. And he's not on the set pieces because you got Trent.
Yeah. Right. Well, we'll pick our teams and make some predictions in a second. But while we have you here, James, we talk about them almost on every podcast now. Dejan Lovren's made some colourful comments about Salah's contract situation. Just sort of your gut feeling, your thoughts on where they're up to with it, and I don't know, your opinion on how they got here and where it goes.
With Lovren's comments, it's difficult to know, isn't it? Like how much importance to attach to them, because yes, they were good mates obviously when Lovren was at Liverpool, but he hasn't been around for a few years. I don't know the answer to how often they still speak.
He said they speak on the phone every so often.
Right?
And he's never been afraid to give his opinion as he loved.
No, and also, you know, I don't think Mo Salah confides in too many people about his intentions. So I'd probably treat it with a bit of a pinch of salt. I don't think Mo Salah would have asked Dejan Lovren to become his official spokesman. Yeah, it's. I don't think things have really moved on, have they? It feels like you end up kind of coming back to the same position, which was like right the way through the process. I've always been most confident that Van Dijk would stay, still the same. You know, it's. I just think you look at the level that he's performing at, everything that Van Dijk gives you. You know, he's been the best centre back in world football so far this season, but then it's all the other side in terms of the way he is the perfect role model and leader. And, you know, just, you know, obviously the way he faces up to the media after every single game, and he's the one that's setting the tone about it's always about the next game, you know, keeping feet on the ground and all the rest of it. And I think the fact that we've hardly heard any murmurs, have we, about him potentially even going anywhere else. And you think that, to me, as well, kind of contributes to this idea that surely that gets done.
Is that not a slight concern, though? Because if you'd asked me at the start of the season, I'd have said, I think it did say Van Dijk will get done soon. But we're now 2/3 of the way through and it's still not quite there. And you think, if they haven't done it with Van Dijk, like you feel like it would be the more straightforward of the three.
Yeah, I mean, there was this school of thought. I think Robbie Fowler mentioned it earlier, recently, didn't he, about this idea that maybe it was done and had been put in a drawer somewhere. Now, Van Dijk has said that that's not the case. But yeah, I still think Van Dijk stays. I mean, it would be absolutely crazy to lose. Because I think, obviously, Salah's numbers are off the scale. And, of course, losing him would be devastating. But, you know, how do you even try and think about replacing Van Dijk? You know, I don't, like, with everything he gives you and performing at such a high level. And, you know, another 2 or 3 years, I just think is an absolute no-brainer for him. The Salah one, I think, is really interesting because I don't think he has another option in Europe. I think it's a straight choice between Saudi and signing the extension at Liverpool, and I think, you know, I guess PSG would be the only one, but I don't see him wanting. It's
KK. I can't say his name.
Kvaratskhelia.
Yeah. And they've kind of moved away, haven't they, from those kind of deals as well. I think for Salah, he has a big decision to make regarding, you know, what is it that motivates him more than anything in terms of, you know, if it just comes down to how many noughts are on the end of the contract offer, then he'll go to Saudi, because regardless, and we don't know what Liverpool have offered him, but regardless of what they've offered him, we know that it won't be close to what Saudi be willing to pay him. But then I look at Salah and I think, are you really ready to go over there and play at this stage of your career with the, and he like Salah more than anyone knows, he knows every single record he's on the brink of breaking. He's obsessed with the numbers and the stats, and you think, are you really going to walk away from, you look at, he's closing in on Aguero now, isn't he? When you look at the all-time Premier League goal-scoring list, if he stays around for another year or two, he's going to go above, people like Rooney and Kane as well. It's like, so I still think that's probably a 50-50 shout. I wouldn't like to say which way it will go. And then, Trent has just gone quite quiet, hasn't it? I think it was obvious from the start of January when Real Madrid made the approach that Liverpool was so emphatic that there was never any chance he was going anywhere in January. Real Madrid then set their sights on convincing him to come in the summer. And he's got a lot of thinking to do, hasn't he, in terms of what he wants to do and the implications for his Anfield legacy. And so yeah, I think the big positive for me so far is the fact that it hasn't been the distraction that I probably thought it might become. Because I think if you'd said to me in August that we'd still be sat here talking about this in the middle of February, you think, well, surely that would have some kind of detrimental impact because there's 3 such huge figures in the dressing room. Thankfully, certainly up to this point, that hasn't happened.
Let's rattle through our teams and make some predictions because, James, we've got places to go and people to see. So, we'll start with you, Theo. Alisson in goal, and then who's your back four?
Robertson's back in, Van Dijk's back in, Konate's back in, and I'd imagine Trent's not going to make it, at least not to start, because Bradley didn't go to Plymouth, so he continues at right back.
Yeah, I would go along with that.
Yeah, I wouldn't argue with that. Yeah, I think Trent's touch and go, and especially I think again with it being the first of 5 in the space of 15 days, you're not taking any chances, are you?
Yeah. And this game could suit Bradley as well. You know, a bit of a scrap, and he's a physical lad, isn't he? What's your midfield, James?
No great surprises. Gravenberch, McAllister, Szoboszlai. I think that just picks itself at the moment, doesn't it? They just perfectly complement each other.
As you're a special guest, I'll let you stick with your forward line because I'm sure your midfield's the exact same.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think going back to what we were talking about earlier on, I just think with the physical side of things, I would go Núñez through the middle, and then Salah right, Gakpo left. I'd be surprised if he deviated from that.
Yeah, I think the same. Núñez did well when he started against Spurs the other week. Just seems to be in a good place at the moment, playing with a bit more confidence, and it's just nice to have a natural striker on there rather than Diaz. It's obviously going to be Salah. It's obviously going to be Gakpo. So go for what gives you a more natural team.
I feel like you can move their centre-halves around, don't you, and compete with them. And
I'd worry.
I'd worry that Diaz would just get a bit overwhelmed by get bullied a little bit. I don't think that's a game for Diaz in the false 9. I
think there's another issue as well. I mean, the amount of corners and free kicks headed away by Núñez against Tottenham the other night. Yeah. If they're going to have set pieces, he'll be on the front post, won't he, for all of them? So that will be important. James, give us a prediction. Don't let us down. You're sitting in for Doyley, so if you want to channel your inner Doyle.
I've never wanted to channel my inner Doyle. I try and keep that very quiet. Everton 1, Liverpool 2.
Come on.
2-0 Liverpool.
Yeah, I'm going to go 2-1 Liverpool, I think. Feeling fairly confident. It's going to be a tough one.
What's producer Ian saying?
Wednesday, to be fair, he's so under the weather. He's looking worse than when we started the pod. Yeah, fair play. Right, James, thank you so much for coming in.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
Back. Theo, thank you as well.
No worries.
And we will be back on Friday to look back at the Merseyside Derby, to look ahead to Wolves. Thursday, we're recording Thursday this weekend. It's just reminded me. So if you want to join us live, join us on Thursday. Liverpool.com, have they got a pod in tomorrow? Tomorrow, Liverpool.com as well tomorrow if you want to tune in for that. Thanks very much, guys. Cheers, and see you on Friday. Ta-ra.